Page 395. And for thousands of years, you have been believing these deceivers and charlatans, the false prophets, whereas you have been insulting the true prophets by calling them liars, calumniating them, persecuting them, and striving to kill them. You believe the charlatans and deceivers, the false prophets, as well as their priests and other servants of God's, and you expect from them that they can reveal everything to you, which is the truthly truth, and what is hidden behind the truthly laws and recommendations of the life. They, however, cannot give you any answer to this, because their knowledge is not built up on the creational truth, but rather on an unreal belief in a Godhead or in tin gods and their cults and rites. You, however, you are satisfied with their false presentations and explanations, and you willingly let yourselves be guided into the unreal, and indeed without you yourselves searching for the fundamental truth of the life, because you are captured in a religious belief, which is your belief of the servitude. Truly, you only live according to the misguiding words of your priests, who maintain that they are repeating the words of their God, which, however, truthfully does not exist, and, as an imaginary unreality, has neither the power to do good or evil. And since you only live according to the misguiding and false words of your priests and supposed gods and tin gods, therefore your life is hollow and empty. And because you do not determine over yourselves, but let yourselves be determined through your belief in imaginary gods and tin gods, as well as through their priests and other worshippers of gods and worshippers of tin gods, therefore you are no more than human beings at second hand, because you only take from what is prescribed to you through the belief, and what is said to you through the priests and worshippers of gods, as well as worshippers of tin gods, without you truthfully deciding for yourselves. You are not using your intellect and your rationality in order to fathom out the truthly truth of the life through your own thoughts and feelings, and to find it in the creational laws and recommendations, as they are manifoldly also recognizable in the free nature. And by leading your life in your belief in gods and tin gods, you do not let any true control prevail over yourselves and your doing, as well as over your thoughts, feelings, and deeds. Rather, you let yourselves be led simply uncontrolled through your intentions and inclinations, as well as through your lustfulnesses and attitudes, as well as through what is forcefully imposed upon you through the circumstances and through your fellow human beings, or through the environment. Therefore, you are not the result of yourselves, but rather the result of many and manifold influences that continuously break in upon you, in particular, influences that result out of your belief in your invented gods and tin gods. In you, there is only the long-standing belief in your deities and tin gods, however, nothing new, nothing that you have discovered yourselves, and nothing that you discover yourselves, because you are truly empty and hollow with regard to the truthly knowledge about the reality of the creation, and of its laws and recommendations. Therefore there is nothing original and nothing primeval in you, only belief in a fabulated god or tin god. Truly, since time immemorial, since the entire religious past, you human beings of earth have been irrationally taught and assured through religious or sectarian teachers, and you continue to be taught irrationally and assured that you, providing you undertake cult activities such as rites and sacrifices, as well as repeating certain prayers or mantras, will receive enlightenment and a propitious existence. And it has been and is said to you that it is necessary that you shall suppress your needs and wishes, and that you shall adapt yourselves to certain norms and control your thoughts as well as purify your passions and raise them into higher levels, so you shall be God-pleasing. And furthermore, it has been and continues to be said to you, through the religions, that you shall restrain your drives and refrain from sexual debaucheries, so that your, quote, spirit and your body will be purified. And, as has been and continues to be religiously taught to you, it is only when your, quote, spirit and body are sufficiently tortured that you shall find a higher life, which is only to be found beyond the meaningless earthly life. And truly, so-called religious human beings amongst you, numbering in the millions, have done in this wise over the past hundreds and thousands of years, and many amongst you human beings of earth still do so equally today, however, without success, as always since time immemorial. As your forefathers before you, you go into the seclusion, into monasteries, into the quiet cell, into the mountains, into the forest, into a cave, into the desert, or you go begging through the world, alone or in groups, in order to force your consciousness, or erroneously called, quote, spirit, to join into a belief and to adapt itself to an unreality thought up through you human beings. But truly, through that, you are merely going even more astray in the irrational teachings, and in the belief in gods and tin gods and the like, because the more you do this, the deeper you fall into the darkness of the not knowing and the untruth. Consider, human beings of earth, what you are doing in this wise makes you into tormented human beings with a broken consciousness, broken thoughts and feelings, and a broken psyche. In this wise, you truly cannot escape from the tumult of the world happenings, even if you strive to do so, because if you attempt to abdicate the outside world through such discipline, and through that to adapt yourselves to your belief and its requirements and expectations, then you will only be insensitive against the truth and reality. And furthermore, no matter how long you may strive and struggle, you will only ever find what corresponds to your misguided thoughts and feelings, and therefore to your delusions. Truthfully, a completely different way must be taken if you want to find and discover those things on the other side of the tumult of the world and of the angstful and ambitious, fear-filled as well as guiltful and nervous life, which contain higher values, which, however, has nothing to do with illusory enlightenments and fabulated godly spheres and unrealities of being, but rather solely and alone with the effective truth of reality. Fundamentally, you human beings of earth must go into yourselves in order to acquire everything in yourselves, by you creating true love in yourselves, as well as inner peace, inner freedom, and harmony. If, in doing so, you give up all lovelessness, all unpeace, as well as all disharmony and unfreedom by which you are bound, and if you practice the status of equalizedness and neutrality in yourselves, then, over the course of time, an inner blossoming of that inner love and beauty will arise, which opens the entire life in full magnificence. You, however, human beings of earth, you are in reality doing precisely the opposite, and therefore everything in order to be narrow-minded, loveless, inferior, and unsignificant. If you are fathoming out your true core, if you are peeling away layer by layer, then you take your time in doing so, although you are filled with expectations that you will find goodness in yourselves, as you also hope that the next morning or your next life will bring good things for you. But when you then finally reach the center of the core of your inner nature, then you discover with dread that there is nothing in there but emptiness or rubbish, because you could not put anything valuable into it, since your consciousness has been left dormant, and you have made your thoughts and feelings blunt, incapable, and unconcerned through a belief in a god or tin god. But it is only when this discovery has been made that you ask yourselves whether there might not be a different way leading to the effective truth rather than the belief in a god or tin god, so that you can nevertheless still break through from the center of your inner nature to the real truth. Unfortunately, you and the bulk of the world accept and follow the traditional way, which is that of the religious belief in a god or tin god, because of which the true reality is not recognized. If you, human beings of Earth, honestly fathom out the truthly cause of the chaos in yourselves, then you will recognize that this cause is the search for a false reality, which has been promised to you by false prophets and false teachers, as well as by priests and other servants of gods and servants of tin gods since time immemorial. Therefore, you mechanically follow the irrational teachings which assure you a beneficial or spiritual life. But you can never achieve this because you do not turn to the creational truth of all truth, but instead only ever to a religious belief in an invented god or tin god, which are without energy or power. Truly, you human beings of Earth, if you consider the highest peculiarity that you oppose any religious, sectarian, political, or private tyranny and any dictatorship, or any other power if it is directed against you yourselves, and you become aware of it, whereas inwardly you accept the authority, tyranny, and dictatorship of another, if it is directed against one or more of you human beings, or against an entire people. Truly, your consciousness and your behavior are also confused in this direction, because you are not capable of clear intellect, and also not of clear rationality. It is also peculiar if you repudiate, and not intellectually, but rather in reality, the so-called, spiritual authority, and therefore also the religious belief, as well as the dogmas, rituals, ceremonies, and other cult activities, so that you then suddenly stand alone amongst all the religious believers who regard you as ones who have got very badly out of the control of the good human nature, and are outcasts, because of which you firstly find yourselves in conflict with the believers, and secondly also with the priests and other higher worshippers of gods and tin gods, and further also with society itself. If you distance yourselves from the religious belief, then you are ones who have got very badly out of control of the good human nature, outcasts, or, godless ones in the eyes of the society, and therefore human beings to whom no more esteem is shown. Nevertheless, also this is no stumbling block for you to continue wallowing in the false religious belief, rather than turning to the effective and real truth of all truth, to the truth of the creation and its laws and recommendations. However, you want to be esteemed human beings in the society, but through this you cannot find the way to the real truth of the creational laws and recommendations, and it is also impossible for you to come nearer to the endless and unmeasurable reality. You cowardly accept the truth unknowledge against the truthly truth of all truth, of the creation, and of its laws and recommendations, in order to have a certain standing in the society, and to profit from this standing in one or another kind and wise. Truly you are ruled by cowardice, and you bow down in anxiety and fear of the harsh rule of religion, whatever it may be, and indeed only because you, in your pusillanimousness and chicken-heartedness, are unable to bring forth the courage to be yourselves, to promote in yourselves your own thoughts of the rationality and intellect, in order to let the effective truth be granted to yourselves, and to turn away from the untruth of the religious belief in a godhead or in a tin god. But truly, you human beings of Earth, You are peculiar, because if you have begun to turn away from the traditional way of the religious belief, and therefore to negate all the false things, then you create a reaction out of this refusal of the God-related or tin God-bound religiosity. And this reaction is based on you acquiring another pattern of a God or tin God and falling prey to another religious or sectarian belief, which holds you just as tightly with its greedy clutches as the belief that you previously had, and from which you have turned away. Therefore, you, human beings of Earth, simply turn from one religious belief to the next, without thereby reaching the way of the real truth of all truth, namely to the effective truth of the creation and of its laws and recommendations. If you turn away from a religious belief in a Godhead or in a tin God or the like, no matter what kind, because your intellect and your rationality tell you that it is good and right, then you nevertheless do not get any further and do not find the truthly truth if you make nothing out of the rejection of the belief, but simply turn to another belief. However, if you reject the false, the religious belief in a Godhead or God or tin God, in a human being who has elevated himself or herself to a God or God representative, in saints, angels, and demons, because you recognize that each religious or other belief is merely made out of a blunt consciousness, and if you understand the immaturity of the social and religious accords and rules of conduct, and repudiate these on the basis of deep insight, because you are continuously becoming freer in yourselves when you turn to the real truth, then, on the one hand, you will be free of the uncalmness in yourselves, whereas on the other hand you will bring forth uncalmness amongst your fellow human beings, because you are no longer of their enslaving religious belief. You human beings of Earth, however, who free yourselves from your religious belief in a God or tin God, in a human being who has raised himself or herself up to the representative of God, and from the belief in saints, angels, demons, or also from the human idols of all kinds, and who finally become yourselves and also carry all the responsibility for yourselves, you will escape out of the greedy clutches of the traditional characterlessness and indecency which are taught to you by the society and by the religions, which are characterlessly presented as honorableness. And when you get this far, then you will discover that you must no longer search for the effective truth of all truth, because searching is fundamentally wrong, since this is the equivalent to a hunt for something undeterminate which is never found because it is not known and also cannot be found. Therefore, it is necessary to learn, not to search, but rather to use rationality and intellect in order to recognize the truthly truth of all truth there, where it actually is. And no actual searching is required for this, but only a perception of all things that go on, take place, and move around you human beings of Earth, because the modes of functioning of the creational laws and recommendations, and therefore the effective truth, are to be recognized therein, which only require the intellect and rationality, and the to-be-created will for it to be understood and followed. The truthly truth can be perceived and recognized in their free nature all around. So, how it manifests itself as the effects of the creational laws and recommendations in all and everything, and therefore also in you, human beings yourselves, as well as in every plant and in every life form, and equally so in the elements of Earth and in the entire universe, in the stars, the planets, the meteors, the shooting stars, and the comets and nebulae. Truly, the effective truth that lies in the creational laws and recommendations, as well as in the creation itself, can never be shown as such through priests, books, philosophers, servants of gods, redeemers, prophets, ideologues, or other human beings, just as the questions about it cannot be either. However, it is a fact that the mode of functioning of the truth, and therefore also the modes of functioning of the creational laws and recommendations, can be named, although this does not belong in the explanation domain of those who place a God above themselves and pray to it, just as all those caught up in religion of any kind do, such as priests, servants of gods, philosophers, redeemers, and the like, who stay far away from the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, and therefore far from the quote, teaching of the prophets, in which everything that is known with regard to the truthly truth and mode of functioning of the creational laws and recommendations is proclaimed. And the quote, teaching of the prophets, the quote, Goblet of the Truth, only names the facts of the truth which run through the entire life and form the guidelines of existence which you, human beings of earth, shall follow, so that you may lead a good and pleasing and life-pleasing existence, valuing and esteeming it highly. The teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, of the true prophets, teaches you in accordance with the cognitions proceeding out of the creational laws and recommendations, all those things that you require for a true and fair, as well as conscientious and responsible life conduct, so that true love and harmony may exist in yourselves, as well as amongst your entire humankind, as well as truthly freedom and all-embracing peace.